Hi, I'm Catherine,
I'm Teresa.
and we are the co-authors of the book Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives.
All right, welcome again. We are here with Michelle Baldwin. She is a friend that Teresa and I have both met on Twitter, and it's been nice to get to know her. Michelle and I have some commonalities, even like Chihuahuas that have similar personalities. So it's been a joy to get to know her, and we were interested in learning a little bit more about her today.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome. I love it.
Yeah, yes. If you could just introduce yourself a little bit and share with us your current teaching role, that'd be great.
Sure. My name is Michelle Baldwin. I am a semi-retired part-time teacher at Anastasis Academy in Centennial, Colorado. This is my 25th-ish year, something. After 25, you stop counting, right?
Oh, totally.
I think, yeah. Somewhere after 25 years in education. And I've been a vocal music director for a high school, middle school, elementary school. And then at our school, I wear lots of different hats, but I'm primarily teaching music right now.
Awesome.
Cool. So we understand that your school is based on an inquiry model. Can you tell us more about that and how that fits into the music classes you teach?
Sure. Inquiry obviously is all about asking questions. It's more structured than just, hey, here's my question for today. But my husband always laughs when people ask me what our school is. He's like, okay, settle back, 'cause you're going to be here for hours. So I'll try to summarize as best I can. I think that a lot of traditional school models focus so much on here's the content that we want to deliver to the kids. And I'm not trying to dismiss any of that, because there's some important foundational information that kids do need to learn. But when they are able to discover and experience and ask good, deep questions, that learning just explodes in a way and makes it so much more meaningful and relevant to them. So we structure our school around the International Baccalaureate themes. So we start off with who we are, where we are in place and time, how we express ourselves. So all of those themes we put into blocks. And our school founder, Kelly Tinkley, does all of this for us, which is wonderful. And then there are spiraled concepts that kind of make their way through each of those themes. But the fact that we don't have to have a dedicated time for science and a dedicated time for social studies, it's how does it fit into this theme and what questions do we have? And we want kids really spending more time asking why and what do you think? And I wonder, instead of just rattling off a bunch of facts. So my favorite thing in the before times was when we would take them on like learning excursions, and they would have questions for whatever field trip kind of thing that we were on. And the tour guides were always like, wow, they ask really good questions. Like, yeah, they do. So there are a lot of things that we don't do that a traditional school does, but and I could spend a lot of time talking about that, but I think if I had to say, here's what we do and what we do well, is that we make learning very personal and relational for the students. They're very small class sizes, so we have a lot of time to really get to know our students, and to be able to say, oh, this is going to be something that I think that you're really interested in. Let's go learn in this together. It's not just the kids who are learning it; the teachers kind of go along as well. So it's just kind of a magical place to be. One of my friends calls it a unicorn school. So
Yeah, I believe it. And how powerful is that to be modeling that the teacher is the learner and the teacher is always learning and you're doing that alongside each other. I love it.
yeah.
So how do you take all of that and fit it into a music class?
Great question. I didn't, our very first year was 2011, and I felt like I was still kind of learning the process myself. And as we've gone through different years, I have not strayed much from my ORF training and Kodaya training, because I feel like those all fit into inquiry really well. put things in kids' hands, let them kind of experience, and then the questions come naturally. So that part of it, I try to stay very true to, what are the elements of music, and how does, learning about form and tell us something about what we're going to hear in a piece of music, or what we're going to create in a piece of music. When kids start composing, they're like, oh, I guess I just did ABA. I'm like, yeah, you did. Awesome. Right. But it also lends itself to some really interesting types of projects. For our Who We Are section, this particular block, at the beginning of the school year, the kids just made Who I Am playlists, because we were, I was virtual, they were in person at the time. And that was something that we could do together that didn't involve them having to say, oh gosh, we can't sing, we can't play instruments, what else can we do? But we've also done engineering projects where they had to create their own instruments. And there was one that they had to create where they could touch it to start it, and then it was hands off, and it had to play a recognizable song. We got to present that at ISTE one year. So I think that there are a lot of things that you can do in the area of STEAM or STEM with music, but it always goes back to asking good questions and what's interesting to the kids. If we watched a video of some students taking a train and playing the William Tell Overture down a hallway. And that's what inspired us to do that STEAM project of them inventing their own instruments. So sometimes it's just finding the right provocation and then pulling in, okay, well, what questions do we have? What would you like to do?
That's really neat. I mean, do you still, I mean, obviously not right this second, but are they still singing and playing instruments? And do you have some traditional aspects like that?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So it's just all intertwined.
Yeah.
That's really, really neat. So what are you doing now? Like, how are you making that network now with pandemic and various restrictions? You mentioned the playlist project. What other things are you still able to do?
I'm trying to be optimistic, because my brain likes, I just want to sing with them, right?
Yeah.
And it made me realize too how much I rely on my singing voice to teach. That was my main instrument as a music major. Although I do play other instruments, that's my go-to. And I've been remote the entire time. We've had our students in person. We are a very small school, so we fit through the space and numbers part of it, but they've been in person off and on. So sometimes they've been remote, sometimes they've been in person. So that's been a struggle too, is when to switch gears, because we don't always have more than a few days notice, just because of the nature of the pandemic. That's been a struggle for me, and keeping things engaging and not getting too hard on myself when something doesn't work. I listened to the kids, and the other day I did not do well. I have one of the older classes, they're composing some 12-bar blues, and I was very kind of rigid and say, here's what I want you to do, and I want you to use typical blues instruments, and these are things that we'd already been talking about. And they're like, okay, fine. And I said, how about I take some of you and you can be kind of leaders, and you could kind of facilitate you're a good drummer. You can take people who need help with drumming, and you're really good with chords, so you can go help with people with chord progressions. And they're like, okay. And then nobody went into groups. And I was like, what's going on? They're like, no, we got it. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be really picky. And they're like, no, we got it. And I didn't really trust them as much as I should have, just to say, oh, okay, do what you want to do then. Cool. So that, I think that they've reacted better than I have, to be honest. And that's just something I have to keep reminding myself, like, if the plan isn't working with the kids, then change. Don't try to force it, because it's not gonna go well for you, and it's not going to be accepted well from the kids either.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like too, it's just that idea of when you can, and it's hard. I think so. It sounds like you're used to planning with the kids, because you're there with them, you're asking the questions, you're bouncing off ideas as you go with them. Not that you don't have, plans or guidelines behind that, where you want them to be, but where I would think remote, or in this situation, you lose some of that communication. So you just feel this, you're not sure where they are. So it feels a little bit more like you're planning for them instead of with them. And I could see how that could feel hard.
You hit the nail exactly on the head. One of the things that is very different in our school model is that of course you plan outlines of where you want to go, but a lot of times the kids take it in a different direction. So you pivot, right? And that is definitely a challenge, as you just very eloquently stated. It's extremely difficult to pivot when you're not right there in front of them. And half of our school, we had a lot of kids who basically graduated from our school last year. So half of our school population is brand new and they've never met me except for on a screen. And that whole relational piece is very different. I've been able to have some one-on-ones through Zoom with them, but it's still not the same. And it's interesting because the kids who do know me have different reactions to whether I'm giving them feedback or I'm talking or giving directions or whatever. It's been a lot more of me talking and then sitting very quietly on Zoom waiting for them to ask for questions. And it just doesn't feel the same. So that part has been a challenge for sure, and not being able to be there. I had one student last spring when I was in the general classroom who just said, I get this when you're next to me, but I don't get it right now. And I was like, that's because we're on a screen. It's okay. You don't have it yet. You'll get it someday. But I think it's the same thing here where it's not a real relationship for some of those kids because they've never met the human being. They just see me as, somebody they know over Zoom.
Yeah. So what advice would you give a teacher who wants to incorporate, more inquiry into their music classroom? Where should they start?
Number one, know your students. Not just their names, but know something about them that has nothing to do with your class. Every beginning of the school year, we do an identity day with our students. And it's, sometimes there are themes, sometimes there aren't. Bring in things that are who you are and then tell us. And it's this wonderful, kind of like it's almost like a gallery walk where we go into all the different classes and the kids get to share who they are. And it looked different this year, obviously, but I think that helps us to make connections. A couple of years ago, one of the students, the older students that I would never had as a teacher, he brought in a snake, and I love snakes. And I was like, oh my gosh, can I hold your snake? And he was like, you want to hold, you really? I was like, yes, I love them. And then from then on, he would talk to me because that was a connection. We didn't have to talk about snakes, but we made that connection there. And so I think that I said earlier that there are times when we forget to just talk to kids.
Yep.
And knowing who they are, that above everything else, you'll know the way that they make a certain face. That's another project that we've done before too, is, show me your facial expression for this, set of emotions. So I know, because they all know if I'm doing this, I'm not mad, I'm thinking, but that's because we've talked about it, right? So I think that is absolutely number one. If you don't know your students, and I am very, I feel lots of compassion for people who have more than 12 kids in a class, because it's hard to do that, but find one little thing and make that connection with the kid, because it's just so important.
Yeah.
So much. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That kind of leads to what we were going to ask you next. And what's something that you learned over the last 12 months that you think you're going to you'll carry through, or what have you learned that maybe will impact your teaching moving forward?
I learned a lot about myself as a teacher, and again, how much I rely on certain things like my singing, and what to do when I don't have a plan that's going forward and I can't just switch gears the way that I would usually switch gears. A lot of times I just went back to the kids, which again, in our school, there's a lot of conversation with, okay, now where are we going to go next? How can we level up? So I want to continue that because I do that in person with them. But I think it's also just remembering that, I see them in a screen, and for the kids, if they're at school and they're wearing masks, I can't always tell what they're thinking. So it's been a lot more asking, tell me what you feel about this. How are you doing today? What'd you do over the weekend? We try to do check-ins every morning with all of our classes. And by the time they get to me, I'm like, okay, I have an hour. I have to hurry up and just get this through here. Or I have an hour and it's 5 and 6 year olds. And what am I going to do over a screen for an hour with no instruments, right? So I think a lot of that, just getting super creative, talking with the kids. If they're at home, I ask, oh, I see that you've got a disco ball in your room. That's awesome. I have a disco ball back here, just little things like that. So remembering to make the same kinds of connections that we were kind of forced to do when we were on screens, just to continue to do that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that as well. I think you probably saw my giant dog walk around. My students love him. And that was something that many of them have bonded, with me because of the dog. And then the next thing you know, there's a cat on the screen, and then someone's got their hamster, and just being able to make those connections has been really powerful.
My entire background of all of these things behind me are for kids to notice and talk about. Yeah. So I do have my bookshelf here, but this is not my regular bookshelf. And it's purposefully so that sometimes I move things so that they can say, oh, you moved this and now it's over here. And why did you do that? And just, again, those connections are really important.
Yeah. And I found it's been big when we've just been bringing our 6th graders back in the building, and I am getting a lot of waves and people smiling. I'm like, okay, good. They're excited to see me, and they're sad that my dog's not with me, but they, at least we've built some kind of relationship over the last however many months we've been doing this.
Yeah, my friend above my head here, Sebastian, he comes out. I made sure he said hello to the 1st graders because those were my kindergartners that I left from the spring. And we had been doing a lot with Sebastian. So, and I will definitely be bringing Sebastian out in person when my kindergartners that are current now, when they're 1st graders, because again, like that, just that connection, they feel really close to him. So
I've had a lot of questions about Darth Vader, but then after a while, that's been there for so long. Now it's like, okay, tell me more about Ella Fitzgerald and why you have a Barbie doll.
Yeah.
Of Ella Fitzgerald. I'm like, oh, good. Let me tell you.
That's awesome. So good. And I guess those relationships, that's what's making the kids feel comfortable enough to take the risk.
Yeah, for sure.
And without that, there's not much we can do.
I think for music teachers too, and I'm sure this happens with other teachers that are considered specialists, but we get to see all of the kids, every year, right? And when I taught in another school where I had like 450 elementary students, it was nice to be able to see them the next year. And oftentimes they would come to my classroom and say, oh, we're taking the terrible novas today, which is Terra Novas, and could we just do lullabies today? Oh, okay, sure, great, let's do that. So even though in that aspect, that particular school where I didn't have as much flexibility as I do in my current school, it was still a situation where I could listen to what the kids needed and go, oh yeah, I know I had, planned for us to do really loud drumming today, but maybe lullabies is a better idea. Tell me more about why you want to do a lullaby. And, it was just an opportunity for me to listen to what the kids needed and still be able to think, okay, I have standards that I have to be meeting. But here's how I can make sure that I'm doing what's most necessary for the kids.
Yeah. And how neat is it that the kids knew what they needed, that they were able to articulate, this is what I need right now.
Yeah.
That's pretty special.
It was. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, how could people connect with you if they were interested in finding out more about you?
The easiest way probably is Twitter. It's the thing I'm the most consistent on. My Twitter name is Michelle K107.
Great.
Good. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It was really great to hear about your school and all that stuff. We appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure you subscribe below.
And follow us on social media. I'm at Musical Teresa.
I'm Singing Finch 1.
And you can follow the hashtag Pass the Baton Book.